Hi there. Every church wants to convert people to their worldview or their ethics or their cosmology and or their good news or their convictions. And political parties want to convert you as well, I suppose, or try to convince you to vote for them, which I suppose is a bit different, really, because voting for somebody is really a lot different to actually converting to an entire way of life based on what that particular religion preaches. And so I guess the Church of Nowhere has to come clean and say, yes, conversion is part of the church's mission and possibly the part of the church's mission, really, since the only people that have come forth from the Church of Nowhere, as it were, even if we suppose that it is a sort of church in a rudimentary sort of sense, are the so-called revealers, people like Danny Shine, that want to go out there in the streets and tell people how they should run their lives and what they should eat and what they should do. And so basically, there is discussion, inevitable discussion around how you go about doing this, because obviously, if you feel very passionately about something, then you're not going to pull any punches about what it is that you believe. And even if people are offended by your beliefs, if you hold them strongly enough, you're not going to be afraid of expressing them by any means whatsoever. On the other hand, there possibly is a sort of general way of doing things. For example, I suppose there is some people will argue that there is an intrusive way of proselytizing or converting people, and then there's a non-intrusive way, a sort of take it or leave it kind of attitude. I don't really mind what you particularly believe in, but this is what I believe in. And because I have this conversation, have this sort of argument going with somebody, and they don't like Danny Shine. They don't like the way he does things. And they don't like his attitude. They call him belligerent, bullying, egotistical, likes the sound of his own voice, is basically trying to be a YouTube celebrity, insincere, and they lay quite a lot of criticism at his door, really, even though they actually, at heart of hearts, believe everything that he's talking about, such as minimal living, veganism, socialism, for example, fairness and social justice and all the rest of it. But they really don't like the way that he does things. Now, I personally, there are certain particular issues that I don't agree with him on or over. That's perfectly true, and I think within any church or with any sort of movement of people, you'd get disagreements on points of detail, and on perhaps on certain rather fundamental issues, such as taxation, for example, which he calls stealing, which I call redistribution of wealth from those who have it to those who need it, in order to make their quality lives better. So he has a negative attitude towards taxation, and I have a positive attitude towards it. So right there, although I don't suppose taxation has got much to do with the Church of Nowhere, really in particular, right there is a sort of disagreement, perhaps between us, you see, on the issue of taxation. And he takes a libertarian view of taxation, and I take a socialist view of taxation. Anyway, be that as it may, it's the thing about how you do go around converting people. I mean, for many years, decades before the internet, I mean, it was the leaflet, all the door-to-door canvassing, or the door, or where you actually had a petition, and you went around from door to door trying to get people to sign this petition, and basically having little discussions and sometimes arguments with people on the doorstep. about issues such as nuclear power, nuclear disarmament, and things like that. You see, but the leaflet was given out on the streets, and of course people could walk past you and not pick one up, or they could throw it away if they took one, or they might take it and read it and put it in the bag and say they were going to read it later, which probably usually meant they weren't going to read it yet later. They were just being polite. And some people read it and said, "Yeah, good on you," or something, or maybe came up to you and said, "What can I do? Or who can I join? What can I join? Or whatever. What group or organisation can I join? Do you want any money?" And things like that. So there was a kind of a bit of a response rate, and the responses were usually quite positive. But this person that's critiquing Danny Shine, they ask who has he ever converted. I mean, people laugh at him, people argue furiously with him, people try to move him on, security and police and what have you. People get very angry and aggressive with him, but most people just ignore him and walk past, which they did when you were leafleting. Before the days of the internet, they walked past you or they ignored you, obviously because they didn't want to get involved in anything, I suppose. But the way that he does it, he uses his megaphone. This person argues is intrusive, therefore belligerent, and therefore bullying. Especially if he starts to name or point people out, and he asks for their name, and then he said, but in fairness to him, he's only trying to make people question what they see around them. But there is I agree that there is a sort of hidden anger. There's quite an angry agenda being played out with the way that he does things. And he also then rather hypocritically talks about entertainment and how it's sort of street theatre. And maybe it is and maybe it isn't. But it certainly, I suppose you could argue that the way that he does things is fairly sort of tending towards the negative side. And I was thinking, though, sometimes, well, I tried to sort of defend him by talking about the Puritans, which I don't know if is very complimentary. But then I was sort of, I don't know, shouted down a bit about talking about the Puritans because the person arguing against me and arguing against Danny Shine, they would say, well, look at it from the point of view of the Puritans. I mean, if you really, really believe that going to the theatre is going to end you up in hell, to burn in a lake of fire for all eternity, then wouldn't you go around telling people that they shouldn't attend theatre performances because God doesn't approve of it? And I don't really know what the biblical justification for that is, but they said that the theatre incited loose living, loose morality, promiscuousness, fornication, and of course, Puritans realised, like a lot of people do, that a lot of gay people are into the theatre, and of course, as you know, a lot of religions have a big thing against being gay, and or transsexual or transvestite or anything like that. So that this causes problems, as we know, and the Westboro Baptist Church and all that. But you see, the thing about it, I suppose really, if you can imagine Puritans standing outside a theatre, talking to people and trying to persuade them not to go in, because their souls might be damned to everlasting hell, then that's quite a motivation for actually speaking to people, trying to actually persuade them not to go to the theatre. And of course, most people, 99% of the people, for every 100 people would go in laughing at you because they don't believe that going to the theatre is a sin, or they don't believe in hell, really. Then, if you can persuade one person out of that 100 not to go to the theatre, because they don't want to go to hell, because they believe that perhaps the Puritans are right, that hell awaits anybody who goes to the theatre, then as far as the Puritans are concerned, this is a job well done. This is a good day's work. But even then, I think Puritans got a reputation for being killjoys, and even quite intimidatory. They weren't as bad as the Taliban, exactly. That had sort of AK-47s at their sides and could persuade you using the threat of real force. All the Puritans could really do is talk generally to the crowd about sin and salvation and hell and hellfire. They could only just sort of do that, really. They didn't, I don't think that they would actually single out anybody to mock or to condemn as being evil people. And again, it's the behaviour that they would think was evil, and not the person itself. The behaviour of going to the theatre was evil, but that didn't mean to say that you couldn't repent your ways and get salvation from Jesus and not go to the theatre anymore. As Jesus himself says, go away and sin no more. So I think, but they just probably generally, didn't make theatre out of it themselves, but probably just stood there, with their Bibles, and preached the word of God as they saw it, and possibly sermonized on the evils of going to the theatre and how that might lead you into worse sin. And not an innocent activity at all, but one which held the prospect of being tempted by the devil to do worse things. And so, therefore, one thinks of people nowadays proselytizing for their faith, not for the Jehovah's Witnesses or Mormons or evangelicals, that really all they can do is just sermonize and talk to the crowd. They're talking to the crowd consciousness in the street. If they're proselytizing on the street, they're not actually picking on individuals, as it were. They may, be against gambling, and they may stand outside, Paddy's gambling shop or something like that, and Paddy Power or whatever, and they might sort of say, just generally talk about the evils of gambling, but they don't sort of thrust it down people's throat, in the sense that they don't pick out individuals to mock for going into the gambling shop or anything like to put bets on. But a lot of Danny Shine's videos do seem to involve picking on people individually, for condemnation, or implied condemnation for the person themselves. And of course, although Danny Shine would dispute that this is his intention, but certainly this is the impression that he gives, that he has some beef against individual people going about their supposedly lawful business. Because he would argue that their business it may be lawful, but it's not ethical. But a lot of people then argue, well, they're not being unethical, they're just ignorant of the true ethics involved. And so this is where we go back to the Puritans, that they wouldn't blame people for being immoral. They would probably just recognize that people are ignorant of morality, even those people born into Christendom, that the church has not made a good job of teaching them right from wrong, and it's up to the Puritans on the street to educate people, to school people in what morality is all about, and what adhering to God's law is all about, you see, as far as they would look at it. So it's a complicated issue, but I suppose really that if you were wanting to kind of proselytize for the Church of Nowhere, all you could really do, I think, if we don't actually talk about Danny Shine anymore, all you can really do is just simply speak to people, possibly not through a megaphone, but just using your normal voice, and just literally just sermonize about what the Church of Nowhere is and what it believes in, and why you think that these beliefs are sound, and part of what should be part of ordinary life, and why ordinary people should adopt the beliefs of the church, you see. And then you're just talking to people generally. And obviously, most people ignore you. People will laugh at you. Some people may get aggressive against you, but very few, because you're not actually trying to pick a fight with anybody in particular. You're just, just telling people what you believe anyway to be true. And if it strikes a chord, or if people want to know more about the church and its beliefs, then you could answer questions for them on an individual basis, you see. But that really boils down to the fact that church has something concrete. They're not against everything. They're pro certain behaviours and ethical standpoints. And that's what they're actually converting people to. So they're saying what the church is pro, rather than what it's anti. And that probably is just more positive. It feels more positive to me to actually do that, rather than just being against people and against humanity. I mean, okay, antinatalism, you could say, is anti-human, but I think that too could be explained to people in a positive light as well, in the best possible light. And we're talking about positivity and light here, rather than judgment and darkness and severity and nagging, and pointing out people's bad side rather than their good side. So that's just my little few thoughts, basically, on the Church of Nowhere, and how it might convert people, and how, in fact, it probably would convert people if it could, if you see what I mean with that last strange remark.